So today on the show, we have Ryan Holmes. He is the Divisional Vice President of Operations and Innovations for Helzberg Diamonds. This conversation, gosh, it was long overdue. I did a couple of podcasts on the differences between HQ and stores, but never had anybody on that actually has been going through it. So super excited to have him on the show today. So get ready for an amazing episode of Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy.
Welcome to Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy, where we go well beyond the corporate playbook to unpack major opportunities, hidden challenges, and critical issues that senior retail leaders face every day. So let's get started right now.
Well, Ryan, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. We had a call, a Zoom call, and we were talking about your journey. And I was like, okay, we gotta turn this into a podcast episode. We got to do this because there are a lot of people who need to hear and learn from you about what you've been able to accomplish in your retail journey, which has been a lot. So I am going to allow you this opportunity to introduce yourself, and then we'll get into some of the questions.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed getting to chat with you. And yeah, so my name's Ryan Holm. I'm the Divisional Vice President of Retail Innovation and Operations at Helzberg, which, if anyone's not familiar, is a retail jewelry chain. We are owned by Berkshire Hathaway. Been in business since 1915, and we were the first national jeweler to market with lab-grown diamonds, which is super exciting, especially right now, more than ever. But yeah, my journey, I started out in food service, spent 10 years all through high school and college at Dunkin' Donuts. And then I got into jewelry and kind of a tagline that stuck. I was interviewing to make that shift, and this guy, super witty guy without missing a beat, said, "Oh, you're moving from sprinkles to sparkles." And it gets a laugh everywhere. Kudos to him for just off the cuff. But yeah, last 11 years, I've been in the world of jewelry, and now mostly in operations and now on the innovation side.
Sprinkles to sparkles. I love that. That may be the title of this episode.
When I grow up and have more wit, I will be able to do something like that. That's my dream one day.
Yeah, that's so awesome. That's so awesome. Well, yeah, you did go from sprinkles to sparkles. So talk a little bit about that shift, right? Because I think there are a lot of leaders who are going to be listening to this, but also, those who are in corporate, right? I think part of our initial conversation was this idea around make a move, right? With over here in Worthy Retail, we have this programs and coaching and training around make a move, helping individuals make a move up, on, or out of the organization, which is the premise for this conversation. Oh, I got bars. I just rhymed. I didn't even realize I can rap. Um, but I wanted to talk a little bit about that initial move, right? Because I think that's important for people to understand. What was your thought process from going from sprinkles to sparkles, and then we'll definitely talk more about your current role.
It's interesting. Sometimes there's that mix of like you fall into something. It's that what's the phrase? It's the difference between finding what you love and loving what you found.
Mm.
And for me, it was just this like, I felt like I was as high as I was going to go. Right. I had really developed from an associate working at a Dunkin' Donuts in high school to being essentially a district manager role for a franchisee, and I wasn't going to be the owner. And so, at 26 years old, it was like, well, I'm not just going to sit here. I'm hungry for more and something different. And so I knew I needed to pivot, and I didn't know what that looked like. And, I just kind of fell into jewelry. I had friends that worked in a major jeweler's home office, and I thought, I could try that. I know operations. People are people. I know how to run a busy food service store. Let me just step it up a notch and get out of a uniform and put on a suit, and we'll see how this is. And immediately just fell in love with certain aspects of the world of jewelry. It's really just an elevated retail where a big part of your job as a store manager is recruiting, right? Is recruiting really empathetic people who are good at selling jewelry, because day in, day out, they've got to meet people on the sales floor who are celebrating one of the most meaningful moments of their lives and make them
Mhm.
feel like they've got their full attention. And they want to
Yeah.
hear that love story and sell them an engagement ring. And it's an incredible industry.
Nice. How did you get to how did you get to that point where you realized that you had reached your limit, right? You knew that you weren't probably growing from a positional standpoint, but you probably weren't growing either from a leadership standpoint. Like what triggered in your mind? Like what was the mental process that you had to sort of go through? Because I've experienced something very similar where I was like, okay, this isn't it. And I've probably chronicled sort of my decision making process. But I want to get your thought process from like, really come to that self-reflection of, man, I want more, but I don't know what that more is. And then also the second part of that is like, what's missing in my toolkit that's actually going to help me get to whatever that next may be.
Yeah, it's a great question and one I've thought a lot about. And I think, the simple answer is you kind of feel it in your gut. To elaborate a little bit more though, for me, it was that when a challenge pops up and I'm really engaged and I love what I do, it feels like a spark. It feels like,
Mm,
oh, this is going to be hard. I know I'm going to be tired, but I want to figure this out. And I think I had reached a point at that point in my career, at the end of my time in food service, where the challenges that would pop up didn't feel like they lit a spark anymore. It felt like, oh, this is frustrating. I've done this before. I know what that work looks like. I'm not going to be breaking any new ground in my view of the world. And so I think that's
mm,
really what made me feel like I want that spark back.
mm. Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And I think also the temptation too is the fear
Yeah.
associated with trying to find out what that next spark is. It could be. Did you experience any trepidation with going and trying to figure out what that next spark was going to be?
Totally. I had so much self-doubt going into jewelry because at that point in my life, I owned one suit, right? It was like a suit I had for a wedding and a funeral, right? It probably didn't fit very well. I didn't feel super comfortable in one. And I wasn't a jewelry person, right? Like I wore a Garmin, a running watch, and that was it. I just wasn't a jewelry person. So it felt like a huge risk. And yeah, I wasn't sure it was the right thing, but at the end of the day, I knew I needed to do something different and just take that
Mhm.
initial leap. And if I got it wrong, I'd try again, right? But it was time to do something different.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So you take this, you make a move, you decide to make a move, and now you're in this world of sparkles, right? Which is contrastly very different than where you came from. What were some of the things that you were able to take with you from the one role to the next, and then what were some of the things that you had to unlearn, possibly because you're just like, well, maybe this just doesn't translate well here, because I would assume that there were several things that you probably had to unlearn about yourself.
Yeah. There At the end of the day, people are people, right? And
Mhm,
so that element of like, you know, being a leader and, whether it's managing a store location or multiple, which I did a lot of in my jewelry career, it was, finding the right people, building a team and making sure everyone is focused on achieving that same goal. And that was really the same, between industries. As different as the setting was and the goals
mhm,
were, that listening and making people feel heard and making sure that you're addressing giving recognition and also addressing poor performance was the same between them.
mhm.
As far as what to unlearn, I think one of the biggest things was learning to slow down, right? In the world of food
So good.
service, it's just all about hustle, go, go, go. And in jewelry, it was more about let's slow down and listen to our clients because there's so much more value in that than trying to just move on to the next.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And I think and I could imagine that that was extremely hard. Coming from a very fast-paced, world to, Even retail is still even, Helzberg and selling jewelry is fast-paced, in a different way, right?
Yes.
Because there's still the listening, but then there's also the taking in what you're listening and then translating that into some measure of communication to help out, to help out the customer. One thing that, I wanted to talk about was that so now you did multiple units within Helzberg, but now you're sort of on the corporate side. Could you talk a little bit about that transition?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So really similar to what we were just talking about with that move from food service into jewelry was kind of the same thing. I early on just developed it was kind of a best practice, right? We had this method for setting goals for a new month for associates, and I
Mhm,
thought there's a better way to do this. I'm watching people break out calculators and pencils and papers. Now, granted, this is probably 10 years ago, but still, even then, it was jarring to see that, and I thought, you know what? I've got enough Excel skills. I could build something to make this a little tighter and share it out with my peers. And
mm,
it was kind of an eye-opening moment when I realized the satisfaction that I got from developing a process and rolling it out to
mhm,
peers and helping them do their jobs better and them share excitement and thanks for it. That reward, that spark feeling was so much greater than me being successful as a store manager, and it
mm,
just turned into something that I realized I needed to cultivate and keep, leaning into that spark of, feels great to be able to develop a process for the organization, and eventually, it really just the scope of that kept getting bigger until the point it felt like, "All right, these little side projects of process improvement I'm taking on are to the point where I'm putting enough time and energy and sometimes even, after hours time and energy into these because of the satisfaction from it that it's
yeah.
making it up to the company level."
Yeah. I love that because here's what I'm hearing, right? And you've probably heard this and seen this throughout your retail career when individuals want to leaders want to make a shift from whether it's one store to the next, one market to the next, or different things like that. Um, what I'm hearing is that you started something, you realized that there was an opportunity or a gap that existed and you didn't exploit the gap. You say, you know what? I can actually do something about this. I can actually probably create something that one, I feel really good about, and two, is it going to make my life easier? And then three, it's actually going to help communicate something to my peers and actually help them out. So it's almost like you created your own role and started owning it, and then people started to recognize what your contribution and your value. I always talk about having a valued opinion, right? Talk about having a valued opinion on yourself, your team, and the business. And I almost feel like you did all three of those when creating that spreadsheet and that communication tool. What were your thoughts about that? And when you rolled that out, and then when it started to take off, where did it go from there?
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is I don't think that you can pick and choose from those 3 things you just mentioned, right? You kinda need all 3 to make it work, but to answer your question, for me, the place where it really took off was actually during the pandemic, right? It was something that I knew I liked pre-2020, and I would always kinda take on when an opportunity arose, and when I had that time, to slow down when the stores were shut and really reflect and think about, "What am I enjoying about this career that I've got?" I I just thought, "Hey, it's time to upskill a little. I'm gonna use
Yeah,
this downtime to
yeah,
build out, some skills in that area I'm feeling the satisfaction from." And it must have been within less than a year after stores reopened from COVID that I was then suddenly juggling a dual role. So I had both a regional manager role, so I was covering a territory of stores, and then I also had this kind of store ops and IT integration side role, and really that shift was so natural. Every week became this conversation with my supervisor going, "Here are the things on my plate in both roles," right? And that secondary store ops and IT role just kept growing and growing and growing to the point where I'm like, become a full-time job, and
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to juggle both and figure that out. So yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. So I want to talk about that here in a second, but you said something that I can't let go because I think there's a lot of individuals who need to understand the what you said about upskilling, right? You realized that you had some more time on your hands, but you said, you know what, I need to upskill, myself. And, and uh, talk a little bit about that because what I tend to see sometimes is that a lot of leaders within retail they have amazing operational prowess, right? But then they may lack some of the people leadership, skills and emotional intelligence, and maybe some communication and some self awareness and certain things like that. When you made the decision to upskill, how did you know what you lacked, and then how did you realize that this is what I need to actually upskill in myself? Because I would almost assume that it wasn't just a technical upskill; it was more of a interpersonal sort of decision making process that you had to go through.
It's a little bit of both. And it's interesting. I see the same thing you see. And what I see a lot of kind of frustrated leaders do is upskill broadly. And while there's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
that, by
yeah.
saying,
Oh man, that's so good.
yeah, and look, there's value in that, right? If going back and just getting a general business degree or getting the MBA or anything is going to make you feel satisfied, by all means, go for it. For me personally, it was very targeted upskill. It was, here's something that I know I want to accomplish and I feel passion when I do. Let me just take a couple certificate programs, and then that will unlock the doors to understand in even a little bit broader terms. And so letting that, where I want to get dictate what the upskill is.
That's so good. That's so good. I couldn't control myself when you said that because I really couldn't because I firmly believe in that, right? I think the tendency is that you want to cover all your bases, right? So you go out and you learn all, this myriad of different things, and then none of those things tend to stick. And I think it's extremely valuable for leaders to really understand what those gaps are, the very specific gaps that they need to address. And sometimes they're very singular in the most for the most part. I think the other part too is that, and this is for somebody I'm just thinking about this, the whole Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, right? The tendency is that when we think about upscaling, we think about covering the 80%, which will cover the 20%. It's completely opposite. Pareto principle says that if we focus in on 20%, it will give us 80% of our return. And so I think when you think about upscaling and understanding where you are, there's probably only one or two things that you as a leader will need that will actually give you the biggest return on your investment of your time. So I'm so happy you said that, Ryan Moore. We can probably stop the interview here, but we won't. Um, because I think that part was someone's going to get an extreme amount of value out of this, but they're going to get even more value out of this next topic. You have man, you have the ability now to speak
Yeah.
like two languages in retail. You have the ability to speak store, and you also have the ability to speak corporate. Not a lot of leaders have that ability to do that. And I really want to dig into this into that ability. Could you talk a little bit about sort of that idea of what I just spoke about, the ability to be able to speak both languages, and how important that has been, for you throughout your journey?
Yeah. First of all, anyone who hasn't listened to your HQ and store, that you have two kind of dueling, stores from HQ perspective and vice versa, should go listen to that, because I got a ton out of it, and it was like I was like cheering in my car when I was listening to that. I was like,
Oh,
yes, exactly that, because that's the world that I live in, and so what I think happens in a lot of organizations is there is just simply misunderstanding of
mm,
what each group is facing, right? Neither group has usually, not always, but usually not lived what the other has. And so I think there's perception that's wrong on both sides, right? So from a headquarters perspective, I think often there's frustration with the stores. They're going, I don't get this. I spent forever putting together this, visual merchandise change that I want to roll out to the stores. And I made it really detailed, and I had someone vet the communication, and I was clear. And, I consulted the stores when I developed it, and we rolled it out, and it didn't get 100% adoption, and I'm frustrated. On the store side, what you're seeing is someone going, they rolled this out and I don't get it. They go into an office, they don't have customers and call offs and people distracting them. They get 40 hours a week to sit in a chair and focus on this. And boundless resources. It should be perfect. And neither side is right at all, right? The person who went into headquarters is dealing with way more than the stores realize. There are definitely not limitless resources, right? They had to work cross-functionally in a situation in which not everyone's goals are aligned with theirs, and vie for resources and work with a vendor to develop whatever thing they're rolling out to the stores, right? And they had other competing meetings and things pulling their time away from that project, and probably a deadline where they had to push it out a little earlier than they wanted. And on the flip side of that, the people in headquarters rolling out to stores aren't thinking about the fact that, okay, yeah, you didn't get 100% adoption, but some of the stores you rolled out to, someone in that store, left the week before. Someone else is just found out they're really sick and are going to be on leave of absence. And there's tons of reason. You need to give that store so much empathy and patience and pause with what you're asking them to do.
That's so good. That is so good. And I I often feel that I mean, maybe you and I were having this conversation before, and I've told this story several times where, whenever there was a new initiative that was rolling out, part of the thing that I would do for my markets was like I would raise my hand and say, "Hey, let's do it. Let's do it."
Yeah.
And I think my team initially, they used to always get pissed off at me. Well, that's just you're just adding to the workload, Steve, and you don't understand it because you're not dealing with the day to day. And then as we would get into the throes of the initiative um and the different ideas that corporate would want to see happen, and I would bring in leaders, store leaders, and they would have a seat at the table, and they were actually helping to create the conversation, then allowing the conversation to be thrusted upon them, and they started to see what corporate does in a different light, compared to like, oh, hold it for a second. Now I could understand their timetable compared to my timetable. And so anybody who's listening to this, if you have the opportunity to take on initiative, something from a corporate standpoint, I highly recommend it. Your team will probably get pissed at you. Don't tell them Steve told you to do it, because I still want them to listen to the podcast. But yeah, you can tell them I told you. But I think there's a lot of value in sort of this, I don't know if you want to call it reverse mentoring type of perspective that needs to take place. What are your thoughts on that, Ryan?
I totally agree that repeated communication with someone in the whether it's HQ or stores that you have respect for and interest in what they're doing is so important, because I think a lot of retail leaders today are rightfully saying, "Hey, we need to do more. We need to do more store visits, right? We need to start,
Mhm.
mixing these cultures and understanding our stores better." But there is something that you gain from that repeated communication versus a singular store visit that I just don't think one is a substitute for the other.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. A couple more things I want to chat about. I cannot have a conversation with you without talking about AI, right? And its impact, or its lore, if you will, over the retail space, um, where the narrative is maybe not even the narrative, it's more the reality of what we see, where a lot of retail companies, the corporate aspect,
Yeah.
and they're running with it. They're going after it. They're like, "Hey, we need to do this. I got competition over here that's doing it, and I got the stakeholders and the shareholders in my ear over here saying we need to figure out how to implement and infuse AI into this process. But then you have the stores and the field leaders who are like, we don't need it, or what does this mean for us? Being the fact that you can speak both languages, and are you currently dealing with anything associated with AI within your current role or any initiatives? And how are you dealing with that and communicating that to the team?
Yeah, most all of my projects right now have some level of AI involved. Some of it's more machine learning than AI, but it gets branded that way nowadays.
Agreed.
But I think there's a lot of both excitement and hesitancy around the term AI today. And what's really interesting is, and we talked a little about this in our last conversation, that walk, crawl, walk, run with AI.
Mhm.
And I think to your point, the run phase is what gets the hype on, you go on LinkedIn, you see people talking about their tech stack. And, the thing with the run phase is it's not free. It costs a lot of money and it takes partners, right? The crawl phase, it is fairly simple, even though I think there's still people avoiding that crawl phase. And the crawl phase is fairly easy, right? Everyone has an example of, they pulled up Chat GPT and you said, well, what are you interested in? Oh, I'm interested in health and nutrition. Great. Ask Chat GPT to make you a meal plan. And then, people are blown away. And you can respond and say, well, I'm a vegetarian. Can you, and which is great. The walk phase is what's getting left out of the equation,
Mm.
because I think what's fundamentally different about AI than any other tech revolution is email can't teach you email. Excel can't teach you Excel, but AI can teach you AI. And so there's this mindset shift that has to totally break through for you to start walking with it, right? And I think if I were to give one practical piece of advice for people who want to try and figure out, who are sitting there and they've tried cool things, they've crawled with AI, they've been like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I asked it to write me a poem in the voice of a pirate and it did it. That's cool. And then they sit in front of the prompt box and they're like, how do I take this to the next level? The one piece of advice I would give is tell whatever large language model of choice, I am and give your role. And what do you need to know about me to help me be better at my job? So
Mm.
ask it
Mhm.
what questions to ask you, and you'll be amazed at what it responds with and says, well, I'd like to know this, this, and this. And it'll give you a laundry list of questions and it'll start learning about you and how it can help you.
That's so good. That's so good. The run phase is not free.
Yeah.
I love that part. There's so many things I'm writing down and we're gonna clip from this podcast. Sticking to AI for a
Yeah.
second, right? Because I 100% agree with you, right? But here's one of the things that when we start talking about from an upskill standpoint, to kind of go back to that aspect. Yes, there are AI can help you learn AI, but I want to ask you about like your strategic thinking
Mm.
now, right? Associated with AI, because I think it it has changed the way that we need to think strategically about the inputs. You and I, we probably had this conversation prior to, right? About the inputs and, the inputs prior to, using AI, and then the outputs that AI generates, for us, right? Have you, how have you had to change up, or if you had to change up in sort of your strategic mindset when it comes to AI and how you think and how you see things?
Yeah, the tough part is it's tempting to move fast with AI because one, to your point, I think everyone's feeling behind the ball, and it's tempting to move fast because oftentimes turning on an AI feature is really flipping a switch and saying,
Yeah,
"I'm
yeah.
gonna, feed this in." But what you need to be thinking about is, am I feeding it outdated data, right?
Okay.
It just an example would be, we've got a communication vendor that has rolled out an AI tool, right? In memory, it'll crawl your whole company's resource library and return answers to the end user, which is incredible. But if you have an outdated resource library that you haven't been maintaining
Mm.
and pulling down outdated content, it's going to do more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just getting that, cleaning up your inputs. AI is only as good as the data you give it.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. We have we're working with a couple of sponsors, and they do sort of AI data um, um, categories, or categorization. At the very beginning, right? Because while they have the AI for the output, right? But their main thing is like, well, how do we help organizations organize their data to begin with? Because you have and you know this as well as I do. Like, retail is not short of data. We
No.
are not. We are not short of data. There's so much. We are a data rich industry, and I think the tendency sometimes is that we hide behind that data, and we either don't do anything with it, or we make a decision and use the data to justify the decision that we've made, regardless if it's right or not. Right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's, it's like, we're gonna go this way. The data says for us to go this way. And I was like, well, why? Well, the data says it. So, well, that our customers don't care about that. It doesn't matter. The data says we're gonna do this. We're gonna sell, like, it was Helzberg. We're gonna sell, like, uh uh you know big pink diamonds. The data says that we should do that. We'll be ahead of the game. AI told us to sell big pink diamonds, and you're like, well, I don't know if our customers are asking for it. Um, so here's the thing. I don't want to see in like 6 months' time Helzberg selling big pink diamonds, right? Or, or
I'm going to say, Steve.
there you go. Or I'm gonna come for them. I'm gonna come for them. Um, I want to. The last piece that I want to move into, and is to sort of go back into this, being ready for what's next. Um, you have dealt with a lot of leaders who, want to get promoted because, what, Ryan, I've been with this company for 15 years, and I've seen somebody else come in and they gotten promoted ahead of me. Or you, even yourself, you came in, Ryan, and you came from Dunkin' Donuts, and now you're doing all of this stuff. And how does that supposed to make me feel? Because I've been here for this period of time. Um, you know, uh, we hear that, but we also hear, and we also see the individuals who are silently not sort of equipping themselves for what's next. How have you been able to identify those individuals who are ready for what's next, compared to the individuals who just talk a good game about being ready for what's next?
Yeah, it's that difference between like performing well today and the role that you're in and feeling like that means I should have a what's next, right?
Yeah.
I have a good friend that's going through this right now. And here's the thing. I think he is going to make the leap. But he hasn't narrowed it down yet, right? He's been upskilling generally, and I think he can do more. He's got the capacity to do it. But it's clear to me he hasn't targeted what that next
Mm,
thing is. Like, he hasn't gotten granular with it and said, this is what I want to go after. It kind of feels like buckshot. And
yeah.
it's tough because it's apparent he's ready for something new and he's done with the current role and he's performing in it, right?
Mhm.
But I think he'll get there. It's just a lot of, he's working with that coach right now, and he's trying to figure out, well, what is it broader that is next for me? And so I think if I had one piece of advice for people, it's find a space that you feel that spark in and chase that. Don't just chase something new.
Yeah, and here's the one part that really I latched onto, because it's exactly what I do, which is coaching, right? I love, and it's not just because I do it. I have been a strong advocate of executive coaching for like the last 20 years. Because I've been very fortunate to always have a coach, and someone that I could that will provide me this unbiased perspective of who Steve is, my thought processes, and how I see the world. And I gotta tell you, it is probably one of the best things that any leader, when you start talking about upscaling. So certifications in school are great, but I think the other upskill that your friend is actually doing is this self-evaluation, self-awareness aspect, and the coach is helping him see himself differently than how you see yourself. Because when you're in the role, yeah, man, you're a rock star. You're a rock star. But man, when you go to the next level, you're starting over. Nobody knows
Yes.
you. Nobody knows you, and you're literally starting from square one. Yes, you may think just because I used to tell this to my team all the time. Um, they would, I get them promoted to like a district manager or a regional manager, and they go off to another market. And I would always say this: listen to me, you're not the leader when you get there. There's someone else that everybody else is already listening to. And they were like, and they would call me, "I hate you, Steve, you're so right." And I was like, there's already somebody there, and it's
Yeah.
not is and it that's all that they're that everybody around that they're listening to, that they're following. You're gonna have to sort of grab that position from them when you go there. And if and I just and I know it sounds quirky, but it's so true. Just because you take on that initial next role, there's already somebody there that is assume that role. So you have to sort of start from square one, build connection, build alignment, authenticity, and buy-in with who they are. Because I can imagine, Ryan, that they were like, well, I don't know who this Ryan person is. What were some of your thoughts? What were some of your things that you did to sort of move your way into that position of leadership?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, no one likes a know-it-all, right? So when you find that person, and by the way, I have to say, I think you're dead right. There are people already in any market or whatever it is, we call it a district or whatever, that people are already viewing as the leader. So regardless of the fact that you might have a track record and someone that put you in the position, there are going to be people looking, going, "What about this person? We've all been the silent leader who's sitting
Yeah.
here." And so, I think the big thing is, it don't try to diminish that, right? Like that,
Mm,
there's a reason for that. Embrace it and say, "Hey, talk to me." A lot of times, this person that is that silent leader may have no desire to move up, right?
correct.
Sometimes they want to move up, and there's something holding them back. In fact, at another company I worked for, one of my proudest moments was there was that person in this store that I was managing that had been passed over for a store manager promotion. I no less than half a dozen times in the last 10
Mm,
years. And we sat down, had a heart to heart, and, had to give some feedback about, "Hey, this is the perception around what you're doing that's holding you back. And this is going to be difficult for me to challenge you on that. But let's talk about that and let's change it. And I will put my neck out and say, if you can, take this feedback, we will make sure that you don't get passed over for that promotion." And to this day, she is a store manager and has been since I left that store. And I never miss a birthday, a work anniversary, a holiday. We always text each other and check in. And it's one of the highlights of my career. So I would say just don't treat that person as an enemy, right? They are someone that you should embrace and befriend and celebrate because they're
that's
viewed at as a leader for a reason.
awesome. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever had any regrets? Right? Any regrets in like, a potential opportunity that you were like, "Ooh, I wish I would have done that." Or, "Ooh, man, that actually over there looked really good." Have you ever felt any regret?
Definitely. I think the biggest thing for me is, long, long time ago, I ended up in a position that wasn't a fit for me. And I knew that where I was at was not a cultural fit. And for whatever reason, I latched on to success in this place that was not a fit for me. And I knew that I needed to leave for a variety of reasons. Most of which was my own mental health and well-being. And it felt like a failure to walk away without having achieved success there. And when I gave in and said, "Hey, it's time for me to find something that is a cultural fit," it was the biggest relief I've ever felt in my career. So yeah, regret would be just sitting in a place that I well knew was not a cultural fit for way too long.
That's so good. That's so good because I think, you know, I've experienced that, so many times. in those in my career. And there's somebody out there that's experiencing that right now. They're possibly in a role, they're possibly in this situation where, wow, the money may be good,
Yeah.
right? The money may that's another thing too, right? I've been in opportunities where I knew I needed to move on, but the man, that money was good. Um,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, I'll figure it out. And then, actually my move out of retail was the toughest decision that I've had to make. But I felt very similar to you in the context of that while I was there doing it, man, I just knew that there was something more for me to do. There was a bigger voice and purpose and intent that I needed to actually accomplish. And I was able to sort of, finally make that decision and pull the trigger. It was extremely hard. Last question for a leader who's thinking about, making a move, who's sort of frustrated, who's sort of in that place where you and I were. Um, give them some pieces of advice, inspiration, or whatever it is that you may want to share with them to help them make a move and think about where they are differently, and also to help them and give them the encouragement to move forward.
I think the biggest thing is listen to your gut. If you aren't feeling that spark and excitement about what you're doing, don't ignore that. Don't tamp it down. Don't try and convince yourself you just need to work harder. If it doesn't feel right, there's a reason. When you're in the right role and the right place and a big challenge comes your way, it'll energize you, not make you feel defeated. And then the second piece of advice I'd add on to that is if you're feeling that and you know you need to make a move, go get a coach. Maybe Steve Worthy is your next coach,
Oh,
but find someone to talk to, right? Find a mentor. There's tons of resources out there, and find someone to talk to about, what's next, and help be an accountability partner for you.
oh man, Ryan, I'm so happy we connected on LinkedIn, and then I'm so happy we had that opportunity to have that first conversation. I'm excited for everyone to listen to and to watch this episode. They're going to get so much out of this in understanding where they are, and understanding that where they are is not their final destination, or it doesn't have to be their final destination. There's so much more out there for people to understand about themselves, but also with the career within retail that they've chosen. You and I both love the industry, and we know that everyone out there who realizes that they have the potential, they can reach that potential. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Steve, thanks for having me, and thanks for the work you do. I look forward to all the episodes you put out, and yeah, it's been a great conversation. This was a ton of fun. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Good stuff.